Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, I want to explore with you the idea of motivation in learning. Now, I think we all know that motivation is something which we all struggle with from time to time. But many people mistake that problem as being something related to time. Oh, I have no time to do this. Oh, no, I couldn't do my homework. I was too busy. The truth of the matter is, if you really, really wanted to do the homework, or if you really, really wanted to study English, you would find time. You would leave something else aside and you would pick up the English book or call the exchange partner in order to achieve your daily tasks. And I say this because many of us are very quick to blame time. Oh, no, I didn't have time last week. Oh, last week was a bad week. I just couldn't do it. And it's true that we all have maybe unexpected things which pop up from time to time, which get in our way. But if English was really motivating for you, then you would do it. So, about time and motivation, I think motivation is always there, but we simply find excuses not to use it. So, firstly, we have the issue of blaming time. And then we have the issue of, oh, I'm not in the mood. Oh, God, no, I can't face English today because I have so many other things to think about. I really can't face English today. I just can't do it. It would be nice if I could, but I can't. This is the second problem with motivation, some kind of a feeling that motivation simply isn't there. A few weeks ago, I was mentioning that when we go on holiday, we often find that to have a day free, a day where you are able to walk in the streets, to explore an old museum, to have dinner when you want to eat, just to be with someone you love and to explore all the beautiful surroundings of a holiday city or destination. Time at that point isn't an issue. Suddenly, time, you have the whole day free, is not an issue. It can be an issue, of course, if you try to do too many things, but after a few days of doing that, we all know what happens. We begin to settle down and we think, it's my third day in this great city, I now feel that I don't want to go running today. I want to relax on the hotel balcony and maybe later go for a walk in the beach, or some people say on the beach. I think on the beach is actually correct. So you can see there that after a few days, you begin to wind down and you begin to get in the mood for discovering yourself again and the things that you want. This mood is a mood that you really need to get into for learning English. The more you push English into 1 hour of your day, you get up, you have breakfast, you sit with English for 5-10 minutes before you jump in the car and rush away to work. This rarely works. And it rarely works because you're reducing English down to a commodity. Whereas when you go on holiday and you're relaxed enough to let beautiful thoughts come to your mind, it shows that you're not thinking from a commodity standpoint. You're thinking of a standpoint of what you really, from your heart, want to do. All of us are caught up in this very quick world. You know, I want to give you two examples. I have a neighbor who lives above me. I don't live in a particularly stressful area. I don't live in a city. But I hear this lady and her boyfriend literally running around their apartment, trying to get things done. They run in the morning before they get out at work, or before they go out to work, I should say. I hear the footsteps moving. And then in the evening, I hear them rushing around doing whatever it is that they do. And I don't really know what that is, thankfully. And then I look out the window and I see people rushing by, not workers going to work. 20 years ago, there were many people who were rushing going to work, in the morning times. But now most people work online, or at least the majority of people do. But I still see people running. They walk at double the speed I walk. And I often wonder, where do these people go? What do they do that's so important? That was the first example, okay? The second example is a man who came to fix my boiler 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think. Maybe I told you about it. And of course, we started talking. And he said, I used to work for British Gas many years ago. And I left, and now I work for the local council, repairing gas boilers, the local government. He said, it's the best thing I ever did, because now I have Fridays free. I can play golf. But in exploring this with him a little bit more, I could see that he wasn't satisfied. He was busy looking for something more. He kind of had that emptiness about him. When you meet someone who doesn't really know what they want. And we were talking, and it was clear that he was very motivated to fix boilers. But I asked him, are you really happy, just playing golf on a Friday? Is that the highest you're going to go? And I don't think he liked the question very much, because afterwards things became a bit uncomfortable. But I use this as an example because although in his case he manages to slow his life down a little bit, he's not really achieving anything. His life has kind of stopped. We, on the other hand, as language learners, have a perfect ability to learn languages daily. But what we don't have, especially if we're not using a teacher or some kind of program, is the ability to push ourselves forward. So the smallest thing comes up and we say, you know what, I just need to get this done today, so English will need to wait. And that decision is one which then costs us a lot of grief and sadness later if we are willing to admit that the problem is not with time, but the problem is with us. A few weeks ago, I had a student who came to me every week and said, my English is bad, my English is bad, my English is bad. And this was his recurring theme. My English is terrible, my English is bad. And then we got to a point where he said, I can't come to classes today. I have a meeting. I can't come to classes today. It's impossible. I can't come to classes today because I have other things I have to do for work. I have a very stressful job. And he told me this again as if it's my problem. And I told him, well, I'll try and accommodate you as best I can, but ultimately, you don't do the work, your English doesn't improve. Which was quite ironic, considering his English was actually more or less perfect. And, of course, the following weeks, can't come today, can't come, can't come. And so, unfortunately, eventually, I had to tell him, well, you're not coming to the lessons, you're not doing what I tell you, you have a repetitive phrase that your English is bad, and you're asking me what you need to do to make it right. Well, attending our lessons would have been a really good start. Doing your homework would have been another good start. So, what are you willing to do in the coming days? And the reply I got was, well, I don't know. I'm going on holiday now to Canada. So, when I come back, I'll think about it. And sadly, I had to tell him, well, no, this really isn't working for either of us. There's people out there who are able to sense more motivation and use it. And I really hope you get what you want. But since you're not willing to put the time and effort into it, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you. And this was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. I don't like terminating packages. I don't like telling students to go somewhere else because I love people and I love chatting to people. But sometimes if I sense that it's not in the person's best interests to continue, then I have to do it. And strangely, over the last few years, there's been a few now, around 3 actually, that I've had to do that with. I think we have a choice when we come to learning English, and that is we can look at it as a commodity and how much time and effort we're willing to put into that. And if you see it as a commodity, it usually means not very much. Or you can see it as a living thing which you have to spend time with and you have to work at. And the secret is, how do I do that in a way that becomes meaningful? Well, the first thing that I can say to you is, if you see English as something which is outside of you, you're here and English is in that country away over there, and you're trying to learn it, that really isn't a good starting point. To see English as a commodity, and I hear this all the time. Oh, English is far away from me, and I have to pay money to bring it here, and I have to try to find 5 or 10 minutes at work to squeeze it in. And another one that I've heard recently is, oh, if only I could go to England for 6 months, I would come back extremely fluent. Actually, you know what? You wouldn't. I went to Barcelona for 4 years, and my Spanish is still, well, it's okay, but it's certainly not fluent. And the reason for that is because when we go to another place, the first thing we do, even if we don't want to do it, is completely surround ourselves by our own native speakers. It's not that we want it that way. It just happens that way because it's the only way we can survive. And automatically our mind brings us like-minded people, not only for living in a different country, but it's the same everywhere. Like attracts like. And when you have romantic relationships or you fall in love, you attract who you are. You attract people who are exactly the same. And this is one of the biggest clues about how you have to change. You have to be prepared, of course, to go out and meet native speakers. You have to be prepared to join clubs, join groups, join religion, if that's your thing. So we have a number of little clues which tell us what successful language learning looks like, and is not dependent on place or time. It's dependent upon something much deeper, something which involves connection with a place or with a person with whom perhaps you could share a language with. Language learning is something which can't exist alone. It needs the whole world, or at least a community, to share it with. And that is where the difficulty comes in. Because if you see the language only as something which you do after feeding the cat for 10 minutes, for example, then you're losing out on a huge opportunity of opening yourself up to another person or to another country. And you might say, well, I don't have the money or the time to go and meet with people in a language group or whatever else. You don't have to. In that thing that you're holding now, listening to this podcast, you have the whole world at your fingertips. Italki has a hashtag for language partners. There's also other things like Hello Talk or Tandem. These are two other apps where you can easily find people to talk to. You don't have to rush away and marry them. You only have to leave them voice messages a few times a day. Hello, how are you? How are you doing? And then try to build on that. If you really are against that kind of idea, you could use Chat GPT. It has some kind of voice builder built into it that you can now use to converse with. I mean, I have to be honest and say that I don't like using artificial technology for this. I think for me, I much prefer conversations with people. But if you really, really don't want to talk to anybody, you could download an extension for Chrome, and its proper name is Voice Control for Chat GPT, and you can find that on the internet and bolt it on to Chrome. Anyway, let's just carry on to see what other habits can generate a better view of motivation. As I mentioned earlier, it seems to me that many people think motivation is something you have or you haven't. It comes and goes. Something that isn't always there. Well, that's not my view of it. I think motivation is always there because if you're motivated enough to get up in the morning and go to work, then you could use that same energy to get up and go to the library to study. Then, of course, we say, well, no, it's time. I am motivated, but I just don't have time. Well, if you want to learn, you can't have it both ways. The other thing as well is maybe it's not about time, but maybe it's about performance. Because it seems to me that many people don't measure their performance properly. And if you don't measure your performance, you're going to be like that student I had a few months ago. My English is terrible. My English is terrible. Why is my English bad? It's your fault because I'm not learning anything. I'm not Harry Potter, but you do have the magic in you to make your English better simply by reaching out, by sharing it, by bringing other people in. You know, I had a student last week and she told me she doesn't want to tell anyone she's learning English. It's her secret. And I said, why? She said, well, I don't want my family to laugh at me. I don't want my colleagues to make fun of me because they will keep asking me, how is it? And if I fail, I'll have to admit that to them. I guess that sounds kind of logical in a really weird, egotistical world. But the truth of the matter is, unless you let some people in to share with you, then you probably aren't going to get very far. Now, I can understand the part about the family. I mean, our families probably, I mean, if I said today, for example, I'm going to become a farmer, I'm sure my family would say, ah, yeah, here we go again. This time it's farming. Um, and that would immediately create a mindset where they don't expect me to succeed. So I do understand that, sometimes other people, they create webs for us to fall into. But as I've mentioned the other day, many of these webs and these conversations and opinions which tell us we can't succeed, many of them were there even before we were born. Many people held very deep opinions which pass from generation to generation. They pass from one person to another quicker than Corona can. And sometimes these opinions stay with us. And as I mentioned in a podcast last week, I think it takes a very brave man to try to break out of his mindset that he's been conditioned into. And we do that not by trying to egotistically attack the problem. We do it by saying, whoa, there's a mindset here that is trying to argue that I can't do this, but I'm going to continue anyway. Okay, and that's a very different thing from saying, wow, um, I I can do this. I'm going to beat everyone. I'm going to be the best in my family. It actually takes a process of surrender to say, yeah, this mindset is there, but I can feel it. I can see it. I know my family don't think I can do this, for example. I know that my community doesn't celebrate people who speak a second language, but I'm acknowledging all of that and I'm surrendering the fact that I can't change it, but it is there. Very interesting, isn't it? So it takes a lot of work to try to pick up the thread, especially if you have what seems to be a group of people around you who maybe are on a different pathway. And I hear this a lot. We all seem to be living in communities now where if we are different, a little bit deeper, a little bit more sensitive, and we don't fit, then there's always that voice which is saying you're not worthy. You know what? I don't like you. You know what? Um, I I think that you're not going to succeed. And to make things worse, I will make sure that I treat you badly, either by doing things which upset you or just by maybe doing things which even I didn't realize upset you. So, yeah, there's a whole host of things there to think about. But just my final point, because this is turning into a very long podcast, my final point on motivation from my experience is firstly, you don't do this alone. To be motivated, you need to be willing to be open and to share with other people with what you're doing at least. Number two, you don't try to force English into a box and label it 9 till 10 or 10 till 11 or italki class. It's something which needs a lot of time and place. There's a reason why it's coming up in your life. It might be perhaps to do with a future friendship. It might be because you know that you need to open your mind to different and new ideas. But there's a reason why it's coming, and you don't need to know that. So trying to hammer it down into a box and calling that box 9 a.m. really doesn't work. So people and sharing, time, and of course the other thing is having a good but flexible plan. So it's okay if you miss your English vocabulary training on your mobile phone for one day. You know, if you don't go to work one day, so you don't do your vocabulary list while you're traveling, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's not the ideal way to do it anyway. Um, Half an hour chatting to a native speaker would be much better than trying to work with a list of words, which you're probably not going to remember anyway. So to be flexible, to have a plan, but to make sure that that plan is a flexible plan, a plan that you can work with. I think that is very, very important. That's going to involve things like, let's say, 1 hour, 15 minutes reading, 15 minutes listening, 15 minutes writing, and you've almost got it. So reading, writing, listening, and speaking, of course. So 15 minutes each would be a perfect plan, just to hit the reset button now and again as well. If you find something just isn't working for you, whether it's the 7 a.m. start with English or the 6 p.m., it's okay to change it. It's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to get the most benefit out of actually communicating with people rather than with a book. Frightening though it is, I think that's where you see your biggest growth. All right, then, I've said a lot here, so I'm going to end now, but I hope there's been a few things in here that's been helpful. See you all. Have a wonderful day. Bye.